Hi, everybody, and welcome to Zoo Dudes. I'm Adam Wilcox here with Gary Priest and Larry Sorrell. Zoo Dudes is brought to you by the Animal Care and Conservation Academy, which helps zoos and aquariums support employee growth, strengthen skills, and encourage long-term success through continuous learning. We're so glad you're here. This month on Zoo Dudes, we have Scott Ramser of WDM Architects. He's going to join us to talk about designing zoo exhibits, balancing animal needs and guest experience and all that goes into that, and what goes into creating spaces that really work. Stick around. Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Zoo Dudes podcast. I'm Adam Wilcox, and the dudes are Gary Priest. Hi, Gary.
There.
And Larry Sorrell. There he is. And today we're doing something a little different. We're going to be talking zoo architecture with Scott Ramser of, I hope I'm going to get this right, WDM Associates architectural firm?
Yeah, WDM Architects.
WDM Architects in Wichita, the center of the country out there. And thank you so much for being with us, Scott. I don't think people who go to zoos really think about the fact that architects are involved with these things. But of course you are, and it's this very specific sort of architectural work. I'm going to let you talk about how you got into what you do, Scott. A lot of our guests come on and they say, well, I've loved animals since I was a kid. I'm guessing your story may be slightly different. But before you get into it, I just want to acknowledge that Larry and Scott have a history. And Larry, you want to talk about how you brought Scott to the podcast?
Well, it was interesting. We hired WDM to do a couple projects here in Rochester at Seneca Park Zoo, and Scott was the principal on them. And what I found, that's not the only firm I've worked with during my career. But what I found with WDM is their lack of ego, so to speak. They were very open to the client's input, wishes, and vision. They certainly had their own, too. I mean, not to say that they just followed, but they had their own, but they were very collegial and very open to discussing different aspects of the project. They also did challenge staff on how things went, but I found the firm overall, and Scott in particular, to be very, very easy to work with, while at the same time challenging our ideas and pushing us to a much better place.
That's a nice thing to say. I know it's almost a cliche that people, when they hire an architect, end up fighting over vision. Is it our vision or the architect's vision? So that's a nice thing to say. So Scott, tell us about how you ended up as a architect who focuses on zoos.
Yeah. So I did grow up with a love for animals. I mean, I grew up spending time in the woods and in the creeks and, looking for critters. But I was also always interested in design, in art. So that was definitely the focus I had when I left high school and went to college. But I was considering landscape architecture at the time because, knowing nothing about zoological design, or even if it existed as a field, I thought, I bet landscape architects do that. And I did have, I'll say, kind of a fleeting notion, and that wasn't something I specifically pursued. I ended up going into regular architecture. So I spent several years after school doing traditional building design, schools, hospitals, other things. But then I'm talking to one of my classmates, and they had started doing zoological work here at Sedgwick County Zoo. And when the time was right, I made the jump and came over here and started working with Matt, and just fell in love with the passion that I found in the zoological professionals and the opportunities that I found. to kind of bring these different passions together, the natural world and the built world, and use that as both professionally, but it was also just, I'll say, really good for my soul to be able to bring that into my life in a different way.
That's fantastic. Are you a Midwesterner? Did you grow up there?
I basically grew up in Kansas, yeah. So
Yeah.
I've been here since fourth grade.
Yeah. So when you started, trying to make that jump into that world, what I guess I'm curious, how is it different? Like, I'm designing a hospital. I've got all these sort of considerations. Now I'm designing a zoo exhibit. Talk a little bit about the differences.
Yeah, there's a lot of pragmatic things about the process that are similar, but some of the real challenges are you can't exactly interview a gorilla in the same way that you can interview the doctor at the hospital to understand exactly what they want. So I'll say there's just a lot more learning curve on every project in that regard, and that's both getting to know the staff at the zoo, all the animal care staff, veterinarian, whoever's involved, depending on what the project is, and getting in their world a lot more.
Right.
And kind of like we don't come in claiming to be the animal expert. Obviously, we've got a lot of experience. We've done a lot of different types of projects. We have ideas, so we're trying to bring those to the table, like Larry said. But we're definitely leaning on the animal experts and trying to draw out what's going to be successful, how we can appeal, to the animal's natural instincts and behaviors and all those things, and in the right way, in an appropriate way, in this setting.
So, Scott, tell us about the first project you did that was for a zoo.
Yeah, the first project I worked on was what became Cessna Penguin Cove here at Sedgwick County Zoo. So it's outdoor exhibit for Humboldt penguins. I'd done some pool projects before as part of YMCA's and other similar projects, but again, a lot of differences when we start talking about all the different aspects that go into the water quality for the penguin pool and having the right subcontractors. Of course, integrating the guest experience with that. So creating underwater viewing and what that meant and how to make sure that the guests were getting the views and the experience so that they could fully appreciate the incredible animals that Humboldts are. Talking about a lot of things, that I never thought I was going to be sitting at the table talking about as an architect when we're talking about husbandry, breeding animals, feces, talking about a lot of things that, just weren't part of what we talked about in architecture school a whole lot.
Not that those things aren't, relevant to the rest of architecture, but you just don't talk about them, I guess.
Not in the same way, no.
Well, working on a pool for the YMCA, it's not too often that you have to put a lot of emphasis on how much poop is going in the pool and how do you keep it clean.
You hope you're not having to think about that too much.
As a general rule, yeah. And it's not just the contamination, but running water through a system, you want to keep clarity for the guest, but there's also a balance of keeping clarity means chemicals generally or other kinds of filtration that taken to an extreme for clarity could be harmful to the animals, especially as it applies to some of the marine mammals that you're looking at. So it's how do you keep it clean and visible but not detrimental to the animal? It's often, in many instances, it is a balance between how do you serve the guest and how do you serve the animal.
Right.
Yep,
So let's talk about that. That this is sort of I think maybe the essential lever that we're pressing in this world is balancing welfare of the animal guest experience. So you want to tell us maybe about an example of that in your experience, how you've had to balance those things?
I'll start talking, and we'll see if a specific example comes out.
Good enough.
I mean, like you said, that is kind of the crux of it, kind of simplified. We always go into a project, and even though there's this balance, and there have to be both of these things to make a zoo successful, and hence to be able to make that zoo successful in their conservation efforts and everything else. But we always go in with the idea that there's no compromise when it comes to animal care. We have to be doing the absolute best we can in that regard. And at the same time, even though we're not compromising over here, we have to create this guest experience. So I guess what I'd say is, as opposed to focusing on the things that might be kind of a contradiction, that might be kind of fighting each other, we usually start with the idea of what are the things that are actually going to bring people and animals together in the best way possible. So how are we going to create habitats that give animals choices and challenges, that will appeal to their instinctive behaviors, and do so in a way that it's fully on view to the public? How do we bring, the animals and the guests to the same location where they can either just be separated by glass or, something like that? And some of those things are very simple, right? Like we can create shade that happens in the same place so that, when the animals are wanting out of the sun, they can be right by the guests who are experiencing the same thing. And then, you kind of extrapolate that into other things across the exhibit. We usually talk about curating views a lot. As opposed to creating just wide, endless views in most cases, how do we create these specific points along the way? One, so that, and of course, some animals are more sensitive to it than others, but so that an animal doesn't begin to feel surrounded by a wall of guests, and focus them at certain points. And at the same time, you start to create a different experience for the guest if you do that along the way. So I don't know. I think there's just some logical ways to purposely do things that that are going to help create a different and varied guest experience. And we always think if we have happy, healthy animals who are active, who are utilizing every element of their habitat, who are getting up in the sun and laying in the shade in the grass and digging in the sand and swinging on the vine, that's also the best guest experience. So we don't always need them parked right in front of us either to make that.
So Scott, how? And I don't know this, even though we've worked together. How long have you been doing this?
I've been basically doing
Zoo
exclusive, 95% zoological design since I've been here, which has been just over 20 years now.
Okay, so it was post-opening of Disney's Animal Kingdom, that you started.
Yes.
Okay, so in the 20 years that you've been doing this, design has changed significantly. I think some of it, if you go back to when Animal Kingdom opened, they drove a certain amount of very significant change with taking the immersion concept and taking it to a next level, doing the cultural stuff and the things Disney does.
Right.
But that has also, over time, impacted costs. And costs not just because materials cost more, et cetera,
Right.
but the amount of detail and design work and constructability that has gone into habitats, and not just single habitats, but you're talking a whole concept of an area. Can you talk about how you have seen it change over the 20 years you've been doing it?
Well, I mean, I think you're right.
That's a whole program, really. But
Yeah, I mean, I guess it is. Yeah, I mean, I've definitely seen the same thing you're talking about. That yeah, I'll say the emphasis on the thematic side. But I don't know. I think maybe what I'd say is there's just more different approaches, where you could go back 50 years, right? And you kind of see the same thing being done over and over, whether we're talking about just moated exhibits.
yeah, the lineup of bear
repeated,
grottos.
and
Yeah, here's a black bear, here's a brown bear. Here's an
yeah,
old
grottos, moats, right. And now I think there's just so many different approaches that people are exploring, which I think is part of what makes it really interesting. I mean, like you said, the Disney model, highly themed and really bringing in cultural elements. There's other highly themed environments that are attempting to appear totally naturalistic, and void of human cultural elements. I think there's some that have taken a more, I'll say, abstract approach. I guess coming to mind is orangs at Indianapolis, doing things to appeal, I'll say, purely to animals' movements and behaviors, but not trying to make it look like a rainforest or anything. So I don't know. I guess I think that's what's exciting to me is the different approaches that people are taking that's bringing more variety to the overall zoo experience that you see from one institution to another, or even within a given institution that that seems to be kind of expanding the way we think about it.
Gary and Larry, I'm wondering historically, I don't know this, but I imagine that, 50, 60, 70 years ago, zoos weren't as much purpose-built. Was there a time where, I don't know, what am I trying to ask here, that for a while, they're like, oh, we got some animals, we got some land, let's throw them in the barn and deal with it. Do you guys know when this more purpose-built approach started to take root and become the rule and not the exception?
In my view, I would give the credit to Dr. Hal Markowitz. He was a professor at San Francisco State and really was a pioneer in animal enrichment and that whole concept. And that was about 50 years ago. And we were talking the moated exhibits that were built in the 30s. They were state of the art in the 30s, and they served us very well for a very long time. But as we learned more about the animals and what their requirements are for choice and control, to have variety built into their exhibits, that kind of started, I think, with Dr. Markowitz, at least in my view. And Scott, I'm wondering, because I sort of spent my entire career in San Diego, where we actually had an architectural department, and which is a luxury most places don't have. And because so many of our viewers are young and just now getting their start in this business, in a perfect world, architecturally, what would you want animal care people to know or to come prepared to talk with you about? As I said, in San Diego, those people were on staff with us. We could just pick up the phone.
Right.
That's probably not the case with the majority of what you've done in the last 20 years. So as far as someone who is totally new to the design process in this very complex environment and expensive environment, what would you want the people that you're interviewing with, when you're building an exhibit, what would you want them to know about the design process, good, bad, and ugly? just for that group of people that are watching this right now going, oh my God, I might be talking to an architect one day.
Yeah. I think he has a couple different things there. But as far as the design process in general, I think it's pretty important to not try to think of it as being too linear. Just A, B, C, D, we're done, right? I think on any project there's a few really important stages. I mean, one, I think it's really important to get to know for me to get to know the zoo folks and them to get to know me. I think there has to be a trust that's developed early in the process. Like, and Larry even said this, that hopefully, we listen, we hear, we ask smart questions, and we really believe this needs to be your project, the zoo. Like, you guys need to really own this, because you're either you're the guy that has to go out and raise money, you're the one that has to live with it, you're the one that, this is your project. We want to help you make it the best possible, but we really need your input and your ideas to make this something special. The other side of that is that hopefully we're bringing something to the table, and if we develop that trust, that we can push back, because, okay, let's explore this idea because I think it might be valid here, and that it really wants to be a two-way conversation. I'll say it's difficult when clients there's some clients that, part of it's just a personality thing and part of it's what you're good at, right? But some people don't seem to want to get involved deeply into the design process. Like they almost want us to do it for them. And we really think it's best if everybody's coming along. And again, obviously we're carrying a certain weight of this because it is our profession. But the more people could really get in it with us, I think it's going to be most effective. And again, it's not so much, there's the pragmatic things that we need to know. This many specimens, this size holding rooms. There's things that we need their input on. But more than that, let's talk about the different kinds of movement that these lemur species have. And how are we going to design the apparatus for them to really use their instinctive movements and behaviors, any animal, right? Let's really dig into those things so that we're maximizing the potential we have. I think that's where, again, something cool and something interesting happens, is when the keeper staff, when the animal care staff and the animal managers let us get in their mind a little bit and draw out what they know, so that we can create habitats that that work in those ways.
So along that idea, you're dealing with keepers who have lots and lots of experience with a specific group of animals. Is there, in addition to that resource, are there other textbooks that you resource and to find out behavior of this particular species? Is it a gorilla? Is it a bonobo? Is it a lemur? And
right.
So is there?
Yeah, we definitely do that on our side, right? We're trying to understand some of these things. I mentioned lemurs. We were doing a project that had multiple lemur species, and so we were really looking. Okay, there are actually these distinctly different ways that each one of these moves, right? And we were looking at how far can they jump? How far will they jump? If we're creating, this apparatus within a yard, well, let's not put a rope or a pole to every single platform. let's set some at given distances that we know they can achieve, but that kind of challenge their ability at the same time. So again, it's that choices and challenges thing. And try to create a habitat that, is going to give them both choices and challenges and reasons to move from one location to another. Obviously, often that's feeding, but it's shade, it's view, it can be a lot of different things as well. So, yeah, we definitely do what we can to dig in and try to internally generate some notions of that we then want to bounce off the client.
Yeah, I'm wondering a little bit about the beginning of the process. Is it more common with budgets that by the time a zoo is calling you, they're like, we want to do this thing and we have this much budget? Or is it they want to do this thing and then they work with you on coming up with a budget?
I mean, I guess I'd say it's 50-50. Sometimes there is a locked number that's not going to change. And sometimes it's, well, let's do a concept design. Let's do a cost estimate. If we think that's a number we can raise, then we can set that as the budget. No matter what it is, budget is always something that's going to be a bit of a struggle, but it goes both ways as far as that goes.
Yeah, let me tug on that just a little bit, and in relation to, there's a big difference in the budget from San Diego, let's say, for whether it's a single habitat or a whole themed area, and Rochester or a little zoo in Manhattan, Kansas.
Yep.
And San Diego, you're talking millions and millions of dollars generally. And all the way down to Manhattan, you may be talking about 1 or 2 million if you're lucky. Mm-hmm. So how do you approach we really want to do this, when you run the estimate or they come in and say, and we've got $1 million, and it's going to cost to do it right from both the animal and the guest standpoint, $1 million is nothing anymore, really,
right,
in this world. What you're really talking about is 2 to 3 million, and you get into value engineering or reducing or whatever. How are those tough discussions approached from your standpoint? Because we all have them. Keepers, which is generally our audience, sometimes don't understand that there's just not the money. Just go out and raise more. Yeah, sometimes that's not really possible. And directors are the same way. I'll just have my fundraising department go out and raise another $1 million. It doesn't always work that way. So how do you try to referee, I guess, to a certain extent, or moderate those discussions?
Is that, right? Yeah, I mean, again, we've used the word a lot of times, but it's a balance, because ideally we like to go into the concept design process with a little bit of blue sky. Like, let's not put anything out of bounds at the beginning. Let's at least make sure we're putting our best ideas on the table. Not trying to tag, put price tags on anything yet, but let's just put everything out there and think about what could be possible. But when there's a cost reality, like you said, some of it is just purely institution based. Even if no one has their arms around whether we're talking 1 or 2 or 5 million yet, based on an institution's history, a general idea of what this project might be. I mean, we just try to be honest and realistic from the beginning, and make sure everybody knows where we are. A lot of times that means, are we looking at things, here's our base project, but we can also do this and this if we have, if we develop more funding. Just kind of, it's a push and pull, it's a give and take. Like I said, we always want to prioritize that animal care, and everything we can on that side. And if that means, I'll say, a less thematic approach, because we're spending money that isn't necessarily helping the animals in their daily lives, if you will. We'd rather promote compromising on that. Again, it's always a balance, because more people come to the zoo, there's more funds, there's more for conservation. So all these things are, it's not as simple as just separating those things. But it's just trying to be realistic as we can, from the beginning about where we're at and what it's going to take. And sometimes we've seen if we come up with the right design and the right people are excited about it, sometimes there is more money than people originally thought. Again, a lot of times there isn't. There's a fixed number, and the number's the number, and you just have to make it work.
Yeah, the M word comes up in a lot of our episodes, monetization, and how often are you having that conversation specifically during the design process?
Daily.
Every time.
A lot.
It's
Every
just
time.
it's just woven into it. And sometimes it's from the beginning, well, and even when you're trying to talk blue sky and keep it at that level, then there's other people, well, we could never afford that. It's like, well, sometimes there's a more efficient way to do it. And that's why I think it's important to get all the ideas out. But, in some way, the sooner we know what the real budget is, the better, so we can try to work to it. But it's just a challenge. One of our projects, the polar bear exhibit at the Henry Vila Zoo, it's actually polar bears, seals, grizzlies, and a restaurant. When we had come into that job, or first started talking about it with them, someone else had told the director, well, there's no way you're going to be able to do what you want to do for that budget. Ultimately, we did what they wanted to do, and the exhibit won an AZA award. Now, is it as highly thematic as some other ones? No. Does it still provide an appropriate and great guest experience, as well as choices and challenges for the animals, and give them a great animal care environment? Yeah, it does. So I think it's a lot of it's a mindset thing. But it is important to understand what's appropriate for a given community and a given zoo, because it does vary a lot.
Yeah.
And you just have to be respectful of budgets. Because most people don't have it growing on trees. So.
Right. Yeah, for people who aren't coming from working in zoos like me, I have an idea what you guys mean when you say moded, but I'm not sure I know what you mean when you say moded. Would someone want to help me with that?
Scott, you're the architect. Larry and I both know, but you're the guy.
I'll get my stab at it. Yeah, I mean, a lot of the old exhibits, and even some newer ones, because there's, I'll say, more modern ways of doing it, but a lot of the old ones separated the guest from the animals with a big ditch, right? It might be 20 feet wide and 20 feet deep.
Oh, is the word you're using moated?
Yes.
Oh, I was hearing MODED, not MOATED. Now I get it.
Welcome to the podcast, Adam.
So, well, I'm glad I asked. If you don't ask the stupid questions, you don't know.
Yeah,
that's
and although there
I'm
are
sure there were
loaded
other
exhibits
people.
with water in them,
Yeah.
I was just going to say most of them are dry moats, but there certainly are exhibits that have water-filled moats. But
Yes.
Yeah.
yep.
So
But this
I
has
wanna-
become less common now. Is that right?
I think it's less common.
still?
It's not, at least it seems like in a lot of the older ones that was the default answer. Now it's one of the tools. And what began to be developed is, in a lot of cases, not as much using them in front, but on the sides or the back, so that you're not seeing a fence wrapping around, but instead you're seeing what appears to be an endless landscape.
Yes.
And I'll say those modes, as that became developed, now we can still create scenarios where we get guests right up to the animal via glass or something, and then make the back of the exhibit disappear. Instead of looking at a giant rock wall, which might cost a lot of money, or fences, which may not be visually attractive, if we can make the barrier disappear into the landscape and make it look like the animals could wander half a mile away or more if they want to, they just have chosen to be up near us, is the experience you want to pull off. So
Right.
True.
We've talked about generalities for the most part up to this point. Can you talk a little bit about how things have changed with some specifics from the back of the house, so to speak, which used to be, hey, we've got a box we put an animal in, it's got a concrete floor and ceramic tiles so you can clean it, and a door to let them out into the habitat. And then the outside used to be, it's either a fence or a moat and maybe a tree or a rock, and that's been the extent of it. It has evolved tremendously from that point, I would say in the last 40 years-ish, where the back is thought of a lot more carefully, with much more intent, with behavioral conditioning, the ability to manage animals, versus it's a box and you can clean it. And that's been the extent of the thought.
yeah, we really try to refer to that when we're talking with animal staff. Just as the indoor habitat or the off-exhibit habitat, even and not just bedrooms or a night house, but really think, okay, in most cases, a lot of these animals are still spending 2/3 of their time inside and not in their exhibit yards. So we're still talking about trying to get more space, still for given animals, give them more vertical space and some sort of climbing structure within their habitats. Again, giving them the ability to, loafing benches or laying on the floor, heated floors to make them more comfortable. Still doing different types of feeders in some cases. Again, like anything, we can just let the animal eat off the floor, which they're glad to do, but even off exhibit, making them work for it in different ways. Letting natural light in. A lot of the old exhibits are total bunkers back of house because they were trying to hide them, right? You can cover them up with a lot of rock work and they disappear, but we definitely work to try to get natural light into all those, whether that's skylights or if it's set up where we can do windows in. So there's just a lot of different things that we really try to do in that regard. But then also creating situations for care staff to be able to safely access animals within those. So without putting them in a squeeze chute or knocking them down and taking them to the hospital, but having access panels and cage work where they can train animals so they can get a blood draw out of their tail, where they can check their paws, through training, but giving them the adequate space and, again, ways to access the animals in a safe fashion so that all that kind of animal care can more easily be just kind of built into their daily routines without taking them to different places. For bears, I think it's in San Diego. I think they have the whole the bear can actually put their head into a cage apparatus that's attached to the cage work. May have been somewhere else I've seen that, but there's a lot of them with sleeves So again, whether it's a primate or a bear or other animals, they can, put their arms in, and then that'll just allows them to check their claws or their paws, or again, do blood draws and things. So,
And this goes to the kind of collaboration you're talking about.
It has to be, right.
Because Gary, is animal training guy, and
Right.
and he's talked a lot on the podcast and also in webinars that we've done about how that training the animals to participate in their care happens, but there's this design element to the enclosure, and then what's going to work in the training. So yeah.
One point that Larry made, but I think we need to underscore, is one of the big changes in the last couple of decades has been viewing back of house as front of house for behind the scenes tours, for educational staff, because it's fascinating. How do you care for these animals when they're not on exhibit? People want to know that. And so to have that designed in also kind of creates an expectation that, if it looks good out in front, wait till you see the back. And that wasn't always the case.
Right. You were hiding it for reasons, right?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. So Scott, I'm wondering, what's an example of something you didn't design that you admire? I assume you watch what other people in the industry are doing. Give us an example of something kind of recent that you think was cool and exhibit some kind of interesting approach to a problem.
He's struggling with modesty right now.
Not at all. These are, I guess the first couple things that always come to mind when I'm thinking about the things I've appreciated the most are the most recent things, but there's a couple that always come to mind. The Living Desert in Palm Desert, the giraffe exhibit. And what's amazing about it are the views you have, and again, it's kind of what I was describing with dry moats. It's really not a moated exhibit, but all the views you have, you're just seeing off into the distance, and it really does take you away. I mean, you feel like you landed on the savannah somewhere, in a really legitimate way. And the thing I really appreciated about it, it was not an expensive exhibit to build. Now, they had this natural landscape, but I think that's what's good about it is somebody had the foresight to really curate these views and take advantage of what that site had to offer. Because I'm sure it would have been really easy to look at it and come up with a bunch of reasons that it didn't work for what they wanted to do, but they didn't have to do a whole lot of rock theme work. They didn't have to spend a lot of money in those ways, and it is absolutely fantastic. Another one I think about in the same vein, and I'll say these are the kinds of ones that appeal to me the most, aren't necessarily the ones with the most fantastic theme work, although there's great exhibits that exhibit all those things, is the Bronx Tiger exhibit. Great wooded site, all your views from the guest experience, you're looking into the woods. And it feels real, and you don't see holding buildings. And even your approach to get to it, you're kind of wandering through the woods a little bit. And I don't know. I guess those are the ones that just really, really grab me when I think about that. One of the other ones that I've always really enjoyed from the first time I saw it is the Pygmy Hippo exhibit at San Diego. And that's the whole mixed species thing. What are they? Are they wolf? Gwynins?
Yeah.
Yeah, that are in with the Pygmy hippos.
Yeah.
Yeah, and there's live fish in the tank or in the pool with the hippos. So you just see this live ecosystem habitat. I mean, and again, I think that makes it feel so much more real. And again, not every species can we mix animals. But I think when we can, when the staff's willing, I'll say, to take a chance, because sometimes you're taking a chance because sometimes it's hard to do introductions of animals of the same species. In some places, they just resist wanting to consider that. But I think where it can be done, that's an awesome way to create a great guest experience. And I think, it can be a great animal experience for them as well, just because they're in a more natural setting in that regard.
We had a webinar guest who talked about, she was an elephant trainer and told us about how, the elephants don't all like each other.
Yeah.
Elephant A likes elephant B and elephant C, and B and C like each other, but
Yeah.
not C and A.
Yeah.
The animal dynamics are interesting. So let me put you on
Like
the spot, Scott, and turn it around. Have you done anything? And I'm sure you have, because we all have. Have you done anything where you say, "Oh crap, I'd never do that again," and I've got to go in and fix it somehow?
Great question.
Because I know I've done stuff like that, or said we need to do this, and in hindsight, it was no, that didn't work, and I should have known better, and never do it again.
I mean, nothing comes hugely to mind. You're going to have to let me ponder that for a minute.
Nothing I'm willing to admit in public.
What about that tiger?
Right. Well, I mean, on the positive side, Scott, that was stuff you didn't do. Give us an example of a project you guys did do that had some interesting problem-solving element.
Yeah.
Which I'm sure they all do.
Well, they all do. I guess I think one of ours that I really think came out really nice for some of the same reasons is the Grizzly Ridge exhibit at the Akron Zoo. Grizzlies, river otters. There's a native bird aviary and red wolves. Really challenging site because it was working its way up a pretty steep hill. So just kind of navigating the hill to make all these things work, and obviously to make it accessible to guests, was difficult. But I think we were really able to pull off that grizzly yard, and really, well, the grizzly yard and the red wolf yard in ways that, again, preserve a lot of the natural landscape, mature trees, especially in the backgrounds, and we were able to enhance that mostly with planting and very little with theme work to make those really successful and beautiful habitats to look at. I'll say kind of on the other side of things is the otter exhibit. It kind of sits in the middle of the site. But what it became was this hub because we pass it on the low side of the hill and we have this deep water view of otters where the water level's up over the guest's head. The guests work their way around as they come up the hill and have views of grizzly bears and then come around, I'll say, to a more standard otter viewing experience where the water level might be at about 3 feet. You can still see underwater, but you're also looking over the land. And then also combined with a slide. So there's a tube slide. The guests can actually come down underwater and go through the pool through that tube slide, which creates this kind of interactive piece where guests feel like they've gotten this special experience. You can stop in the middle, it's not a long slide, but you can, stop in the middle. You have this super cool view. So I think it became a really great way to connect guests beyond the viewing experience. Maybe that's one of the pieces that we could have hit on earlier that's changed in zoo design. And that's really finding interactive ways that are appropriate for guests and animals to have an experience together. Maybe that's the thing that really continues to evolve in the zoo world, is finding new and different ways to do that.
I was laughing here because sometimes sentences get said on this podcast that would not get said in normal conversation, like standard otter viewing experience.
Right.
Your standard otter viewing experience, which we all have.
So, picking up on a number of different things we've talked about, on the guest side of the guest animal interaction experience, and I lose track of time, maybe 10 years or so ago, you started seeing deliberate guest side training walls or guest side places where staff, whether it's a volunteer or an educator or a keeper, can interact with guests and the animal in some way. Are you seeing that continue to evolve? And how do you approach working with staff? How do you approach that design?
Yeah. I mean, yeah, it's definitely something that becomes part of the conversation on virtually every exhibit. And again, that's one of the most memorable things, I think, by different studies have shown that guests have when they leave the zoo, I'll say, is their interaction with the keeper, and what they learned from a keeper, from an educator about the animals while they were viewing. So I think it's an extraordinarily valuable piece to continue to include. Yeah, I mean, we've included them on, big cats and great apes, maybe are some of the first things, but we've done them for otters. We've done them for some others not coming to mind, but it's definitely one of those things. And I'll say safety starts coming more into play when we're talking about doing those things. So understanding from staff, how far away do we need to keep guests? What kind of sight lines do we need to keep? Are you doing this? Are you using a microphone? Are you going to have someone else interpreting and talking about what's going on while you're facing the animal? And just making sure we understand all the logistics that need to be set up, again, to make it safe for the keeper, to make it effective as far as the training they're doing, but then to also have great views and great, and create the setting for the best understanding by the guest. So.
Yeah, Gary, I'm curious, among the zookeeper community, do the zookeepers sit around the water cooler going, I can't believe they designed this way?
Oh, God, yes. That's raw meat for a zookeeper. I remember one time we finished a new exhibit, and it's like, where are the doors? That we got them eventually, but the exhibit, it didn't have doors to the behind the scenes area, and it was like, okay, yeah, I missed that one, but fortunately, and that's why I was really looking forward to this podcast, because we had a very different situation in San Diego than most people experience, where we knew on a first name basis our architectural staff and that sort of thing. So Scott has a much more difficult job because he's got to come in and create those relationships right off the bat, and try to figure out what people want, what they can afford, and what opportunities. Scott, you mentioned something about lemurs jumping from tree to tree, and I've always wondered and never asked, but how do you know as a zoo architect how high a tiger can jump, or how far a lemur can go, and what is plan B if you're wrong?
There's no plan B.
All right.
Well, so regarding some of those things, that is always, sometimes keepers, animal management folks have to be willing to take a little bit of a chance, right? Because a lot of these things are not known. Now, some things, you could plan in a way to modify it. When we looked at those, you can look things up on computers and things, and of course, those are somebody's estimate of how far a given animal can jump. Some of those things are, we talk to the animal care staff, but those kind of specific things aren't necessarily the things that they're tracking in their daily work, right? So we're going to looking for the best resources we can and trying to determine. Some of those things are working backwards from containment heights and things. There are jumping distances for some animals that have been determined, or at least determined as safe, as far as what they couldn't accomplish. So again, there's no perfect answer or no definite knowns as it regards some of those.
Do you guys, do any of you know famous examples of where they got it wrong? They didn't realize an animal could jump as far or climb as well or whatever?
Well, the one that stands out is the San Francisco tiger escape.
Yeah.
Which was a moated, MOATED habitat. If I remember right, it was 12 feet deep. I think it was approximately that. And the tiger was able to reach up, get out, jump high enough, scramble up, get on top on the guest side of that, and unfortunately resulted in at least one death of a guest. So that's the, oh my God, failure.
When was that?
Oh, geez.
San Francisco, probably 12, 15 years ago, something like that.
Oh, recently.
Somewhere in there, yeah.
Yeah.
And then, go ahead, Gary.
No, just to kind of follow up, it as I recall, it turned out that there was some taunting going on by a couple of the guests who were not behaving appropriately.
Right.
And but it was shocking because the tigers had been in that exhibit for a very long time, and so it just shows animals given the proper motivation or a motivation that is extraordinary can do extraordinary things, and that certainly happened. I remember right after that happened, we were out measuring our tiger walls.
Everybody was, right?
Yeah, we all were. We happened to be, I think, the first zoo, or at least in the first cycle of accreditation review after that. So it was, it was fun. And AZA accreditations every 5 years, very rigorous, multifaceted look at zoos, from finances to animal care to education and everything that a zoo is about. So we were, if not the first zoo, certainly the first cycle after that. And they were, the scrutiny on safety and the engineering aspects of what we were doing were looked at very intensely. There's another example that nowhere near as disastrous, and I won't name the zoo, but it was a lemur habitat that was open-fronted completely, indoor habitat, open-fronted completely, and they'll never be able to jump from here to the guest rail. Well, like right away they were on the guest rail, greeting people at welcome to Walmart. So they had to come back in, and I believe the solution was, because it was built and it was inside and it was a lot of concrete rock work, very thematic stuff. I think they ended up putting a wire mesh on the front of it, which was not the intent to keep them in there. So best guess, and it's always worked until now, kind of situations, but it happens. And that's where, as Scott said, are you willing to take a chance? And sometimes it works out, and unfortunately sometimes it doesn't.
Hopefully we're talking about things like interior to the exhibit, like the first example of how far can a lemur jump.
Right.
So how far away are we putting platforms from each other as opposed to an escape situation?
Yeah.
But
So Scott,
yeah,
we've taken an hour again. An hour has disappeared before we knew it. But what are you working on right now? What's top of mind right now?
yeah, actually, it's a couple veterinary hospitals that are taking a lot of my time right now. I have working with both Franklin Park Zoo and the Minnesota Zoo on facilities. Also have a large project in Tulsa under construction, which is a new African wilds area. So a lot of neat stuff going on.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So let me ask Scott, without taking us another half hour, in the vet hospitals, here at Seneca, we give guest access into appropriate areas of the hospital, viewing into a treatment room, et cetera. Are you looking at that for either of those hospitals?
Yeah, that's definitely on the list for both of them. And again, that's another one of those. And you talked about the behind-the-scenes thing in general, but that's definitely extended to all the hospitals that we've been part of, all the new ones that I'm aware of. That's been an important part, is to be able to engage the guests again and let them see the amazing care that the zoo professionals are giving animals.
That's fantastic. Thanks for this look into this world that you're in, Scott. It's so interesting.
It's fun.
Another corner of the zoo universe. Who knew?
Yeah.
Some people did.
And there's so much more that you could get very granular in how do you do this and how do you do that. We kept it at a fairly high level, but if you start talking about where we touched on it a little bit is how high a fence is high enough, those kinds of things. But you can spend another hour talking about very granular. How big is this? How small is that? How wide and how high? All of those things, and how do you do it in a way that's effective?
I think it'd be interesting to do an episode in the future where we talk about a project that you've recently wrapped up and maybe have somebody on from the zoo and show some things and talk about the process. I think that would be a different kind of look at this.
Yeah,
that'd be great.
It would be. No, that'd be a fun idea.
Yeah, we'd love that, Scott. So Scott Ramser from WDM Architects, thank you so much for being with us on Zoo Dudes. We really appreciate it. And we'll be looking for what you're making out in the world of zoos.
Sounds good. Thanks, Adam.
Thanks so much.
Larry.
Thanks, guys. Thanks, Larry. Thanks, Gary. Till next time.